The church banned this weapon in 1139, called it hateful to God, threatened damnation for anyone who used it. 200 years later, it was the most widely deployed weapon in Europe. That is not a story about religion. That is a story about power. The church announced the ban. The nobility had very good reasons to want it. Before the crossbow, killing someone in armor from a distance required years of training. The English longbow demanded a physical transformation that had to start in childhood. Skeletal remains of longbowmen show bodies deformed by their trade. Overdeveloped left arms, twisted spines. You could not take a farmer at 30 and turn him into a war archer within a useful time frame. It was not realistic for war. The crossbow changed that. A crossbow is a mechanically drawn bow mounted horizontally on a stock. You pull the string back using a stirrup and a lever, lock it in place, set the bolt, and pull the trigger. The mechanical draw stores more force than a human arm can hold. When it releases, that force drives a bolt through chainmail and, at close range against lighter armor, straight through the steel that was supposed to keep a knight alive. Training time? Weeks. Not years. Weeks. A peasant who had never held a weapon could become a functional crossbowman before a lord's household could even begin replacing a fallen knight. And that bolt did not care about the rank of the man it hit. A common soldier could now kill the most expensive warrior on the battlefield. The people who ran Europe understood immediately what that meant. The church did not decide to ban the crossbow on its own. The nobility asked it to. Think about what a knight represented. Decades of investment, training from childhood, a horse that cost more than most people earned in years. The whole apparatus was staggeringly expensive. And battlefield dominance was not just a military fact. It was the justification for everything. His land, his authority, his right to rule. Knights were dominant because nobody could stop them. That logic held for centuries. Then came a weapon that let a peasant kill that knight from 150 meters away, required almost no training, cost a fraction of full armor. So they went to the Pope, and the Pope, who relied on those same noble families to maintain the church's reach across Europe, listened. In 1139, Pope Innocent II issued Canon 29 at the Second Lateran Council. The crossbow was called a murderous art, hateful to God. Its use was banned under anathema, exclusion from the church, denial of the sacraments, the medieval equivalent of damnation. Historians debate how much political calculation drove the decision versus genuine moral concern. Both likely played a role. But the evidence for what this ban was really protecting becomes clear the moment you read the fine print. The ban did not apply to everyone. It applied to use against Christians. The crossbow was hateful to God when aimed at fellow Europeans. When aimed at Muslims during the Crusades, completely fine. Sit with that for a second. If the church genuinely believed this weapon was too brutal for warfare, the exemption makes no sense. A bolt does not become less brutal because of the religion of the man wearing the armor. But if the concern was protecting the social order built on knightly dominance, the exemption makes sense. European armies relied on knights, their enemies did not, so the restriction stays at home, not abroad. That loophole is not a footnote. It is the clearest signal of what the ban was protecting. Richard I of England understood it perfectly. He deployed crossbowmen against Muslim forces throughout the Crusades, entirely within the letter of Canon 29. When he turned those same crossbowmen on Christian opponents in France, he was in violation. He did it anyway, because the military advantage was too great to sacrifice for a decree almost nobody was enforcing. Richard I did not just ignore the crossbow ban. He built his campaign strategy around the weapon the Pope called hateful to God. On September 7, 1191, Richard's Crusader army was marching south along the Palestinian coast toward Jaffa. Saladin had somewhere between 20 and 35,000 troops shadowing them. Cavalry archers mostly, fast and mobile, trained to provoke a charge, scatter, and cut down whatever broke formation chasing them. Richard's answer was the crossbow. He organized his infantry into a tight defensive box around the column, spearmen on the outside, crossbowmen behind them, firing into the waves of oncoming cavalry. The crossbow outranged Saladin's horse archers. Every charge that came in met a volley of bolts before it could close. Richard held his knights back, refusing to let them charge no matter how intense the pressure became. The crossbowmen absorbed the attack. Hour after hour, in summer heat, under constant fire, some of them walking backwards to cover the rear. When the moment was right, Richard released the cavalry. The charge shattered Saladin's formation. The Muslim chronicler Baha al-Din recorded that men were advancing with multiple bolts in their bodies and still marching. He was not praising the Crusaders, he was explaining why Saladin could not break them. Richard wanted Arsuf because he understood exactly what the crossbow could do. Did anyone actually stop? No. Within years, crossbowmen were appearing in armies across Europe with barely any acknowledgement that the Pope had spoken. Conrad III of Germany banned the crossbow in his own army, a rare exception. Most rulers looked at the military advantage and decided God would understand. The Genoese, from the Italian city-state of Genoa, built an entire mercenary industry around the weapon, arguably the finest crossbowmen in the world. Entire armies paid for their services. The clearest proof of failure came at the Battle of Crécy. 2 centuries after the ban, the French fielded thousands of Genoese crossbowmen as their front line against the English. They arrived exhausted and without their pavises, the large shields used while reloading. Rain and mud slowed their already cumbersome reload process. The English longbowmen outranged them and fired significantly faster. The Genoese retreated. The French knights behind them rode forward and cut them down, their own soldiers, for blocking the cavalry charge. The weapon the church called hateful to God had become so essential that a king was massacring his own crossbowmen for not using it well enough. The ban failed, but the fear behind it was not wrong. The crossbow shifted the balance, not overnight, but as it spread and became cheaper, the arithmetic behind knightly dominance started to change. Knights were still dangerous. They were just no longer untouchable. The nobility responded by escalating. Armor got heavier. Mail gave way to plate. Horses were armored too, and crossbow technology escalated right back. Steel bows, stronger cranking mechanisms, bolts engineered to defeat the new armor. An arms race started by a weapon the church called hateful to God. There is something else worth noting. Knights had always fought visibly. Heraldry existed so opponents could see who they were dealing with. Ransom customs existed because a captured knight was worth more alive. A bolt from a common soldier did not care about any of that. It did not see heraldry. It did not offer ransom. It just arrived. That is what made it hateful, not what it did to bodies, what it did to the story the ruling class had been telling about themselves. Richard I of England was mortally wounded in 1199 by a bolt fired by a boy. Richard had the boy brought to him, heard that the boy's father and brothers had been killed in Richard's own wars, and pardoned him, gave him money, told him to go free. Then Richard died, and his mercenary commander had the boy tortured and executed anyway. That story holds everything. The crossbow did not destroy the knightly order alone. It took 2 more centuries, and the longbow, and eventually gunpowder. You cannot uninvent a weapon that works. You can only try to keep it out of the hands of people who might use it against you. The Pope tried. The nobility tried. It did not matter. The bolt had already been loosed. If this changed how you see the medieval church and how power shaped its decisions, hit like and subscribe. We put out new videos every week, and there is a lot more where this came from. See you in the next one.